My ex-wife and I come back home and sit down to have the conversation that we've been waiting to have. And she said, well, what are you going to do about your job? And I said, well, we've got to talk about it. Obviously, this is a team effort. We've got to work on, what we're going to do. And very first thing she says in the conversation is, well, I don't know if it helps or hurts the scenario, but I want a divorce. That was the furthest possible thing from my mind.
Ryan, my dude, welcome to the show, my man. I'm super ecstatic for this conversation today, my man.
I'm happy to be here. The grit factor is a good one for me because we always talk about grit here in Michigan. So that's what the sports teams are built on. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, love it. Yeah, I can imagine, right? Especially in this time of year. And yeah, thanks, man. All right, so let's dive right in, right? I need to give the audience some context before we really get into the meat of the conversation. It just kind of warn, I shouldn't use that's a bad choice of words, but just to kind of let everybody know here, this is not a cold conversation, a cold interview. Ryan and I have known each other for a few years now. We crossed paths multiple times, at various conferences and in person. And so, this is not somebody, we're just having a cold conversation with, So when I tell you this man is the real deal, I'm not reading all of this from, a bio sheet or anything of this nature. In fact, before I hit the record button, we had this time to, talk about a few things. I'm like, man, how can when I thought I couldn't be impressed already, like Ryan just kind of came in here like, nah, hold my beer. I've got another level of like impressionism. That's probably not even the right word, but anyways, screw off, grammar police. But I see this amazing dude that's sitting, in front of us today, and let me tell you who this person is. A former CIA agent, which, you had the little quietness there, operating on multiple continents, business owner across multiple sectors, real estate, warehousing, content, author, radio host, not just one, but 2 radio shows, which, my gosh, like, this dude's like Superman. And he's still building. So Ryan Walsh, again, welcome to the Grit Factor podcast, my dude. All right. So we've had conversations that never made it to the mic, right? The audience is about to get a version that most people probably never hear. But before we go there, give me just a quick glimpse, 90 to 120 second quick version of where you are right now, who you are, and what is the mission you're on right now in this moment.
Yeah, happy to be here. I like that you're making us into impressionists here. We're artists here on the podcast here, Karl. But no,
you're right.
Yeah, right now I'm working on a lot of those things that you're talking about. My intelligence career is over, as far as I know. I think I'm all done with that. They attempted to pull me back in. We can cover that at one point, but yeah, I sound a lot better with that description than I actually feel about myself, I think, most of the time. So I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know if I can live up to all of that, but yeah, building the content side of things for sure, and building the 3PL. I'm in build mode. I'm out of a lot of the storms that we'll talk about that have passed in my life. But yeah, now I'm wanting more relational stuff. I do 2 radio shows kind of like this. They're long form interviews, and I like hearing people's stories and championing causes for other people, because I think I like to provide a voice for the voiceless, as far as pull information out of them and make sure that they can inspire other people, because I view it as a compound effect where if you can pull something out of somebody that inspires somebody else, then that person down the road, it's almost like a pay it forward system. That person down the road can then pull something else out of somebody else, and you've got a butterfly effect that you never could have predicted 20 moves ago. But that's kind of where I'm at now, with both my business side, which would be the 3PL, and the content side. They're both relational businesses that I'm trying to grow and make the group better as a whole here.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that, man. I appreciate you giving us the insight here, behind the Ryan Walsh that we get to hear from and see today. But this highlight reel that we see today, this amazing CIA agent or former CIA agent, I can't say current, former CIA agent, that's probably analyzing every single word I say right now. But life didn't start there for you, right? Obviously, you had to navigate some tough seasons, and I want to dive into that because you mentioned something, before we started, or where I was reading. You said 5 years ago you had a 1 week period where 5 things collapsed all at the same time, which, a lot of people say, well, when it rains, it pours, right? Your mom, car, wife, job, all 5 in 1 week. Most people, my dude, would just like, I'm done. Peace. I'm out. Right. So take me to that week, not the summary. Walk me through those days. Paint us a picture, man.
Okay, yeah, happy to do it. I could write a heck of a country song with it because you lose all the things. They say, hey, if you want a happy country song, you just play it backwards, and then they get everything back. So that's what I'm trying to do post that period. But yeah, basically, there's probably a lot of things that led up to that period, but we can always go back however you want. But during that period, it was basically the end of 2020. We all remember that season of life well, because that was right in the thick of COVID. It created a lot of rough circumstances for pretty much everybody, that there wasn't good opportunity as a whole for the universe. And I was basically at the start of December, I was ready to go back into my former intelligence career. I cleared basically 3 years of reapproval into things. They were recruiting me back into the fold. I was trying to go back in so I could provide essentially a more stable second income in addition to the businesses that I was building at the time for my wife, who we're not married anymore. It's now my ex-wife, but she was going to transition her career and she wanted to feel stability from me. So she wanted to make sure that I could have the two jobs. So I had applied, gotten in, cleared the 3-year process. I was scheduling pack out. I was scheduled to leave in January, February time frame. We head into Christmas, and this all happened over Christmas that year. So basically, This is all basically from Christmas to New Year's, all of this stuff lapsed. So I found out just before Christmas that my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. We didn't know the severity. She was the third female member of my immediate family, essentially, that had gotten diagnosed with cancer in that year time frame. My stepmom had terminal cancer at that point, and my stepsister also had breast cancer. So I was trying to deal with all of those circumstances and being around for people, and in the midst of a pack out. So basically, I found that out right before I had to go to my in-laws, who live close to here. My ex-wife had already gone. And so I told her the information, and she said, well, what are you going to do about the job and everything? And I said, we'll have to figure that out later. We'll have to have a conversation. So I go to my in-laws. We come back from that. My car breaks down on the way there. And like totally breaks down. It's all done. The transmission's shot. I've got to get a new car. So that's the second phase. Then my ex-wife and I come back home and sit down to have the conversation that we've been waiting to have. And she said, well, what are you going to do about your job? And I said, well, we've got to talk about it. Obviously, this is a team effort. We've got to work on, what we're going to do. And very first thing she says in the conversation is, well, I don't know if it helps or hurts the scenario, but I want a divorce. And
wow.
And so like that was the furthest possible thing from my mind. I had no idea that was coming, and it was obviously in a very vulnerable place for me. Yeah. As far as where I was at, I was stretched very thin and in very rough shape trying to transition for that. So then that's where the house comes in. I basically move all my stuff out. I got an apartment downtown. I moved into the apartment the day of my mom's second surgery, basically. Yeah, I eventually, so I decided, okay, with everything going on, I just don't have the level of comfort leaving. I can't leave my mom in this time of need. She's the one that's always been there for me. So I decided to stay. I decided to forego the job and basically didn't really have much of anything because I had toned down my businesses. I didn't really have a job at that point. I had to find that apartment and get a place. I had to get a car all within that week while we were building up basically between my mom's first and second surgeries, of which she had 4 total. So I'll let that kind of, that's kind of the general information, and I'm happy to go whatever direction from there.
Real quick, before we keep going, if you've been listening to this conversation and something hit a nerve, if something we talked about made you pause, or you felt that little tug in your chest like, man, that one was for me, I want you to lean into that for a second. Don't just brush it off. Because here's the thing. Conversations like this, yes, they're great. And I love doing this show. I really do. But if I'm being real with you, a conversation can only take you so far. At some point, you got to stop nodding along and actually do something with that feeling. So here's what I want you to do. I want to personally invite you to something we built called the Reforged Challenge. It's a live 5-day experience I created specifically for people like you. High performers who know they're capable of more, but something got knocked sideways and the old playbook just stopped working. Or maybe life smacked you in the face with a 2x4 that you just didn't see coming. Maybe the fire just dimmed and you can't figure out how to reignite it. 5 days, 5 real identity shifts, live coaching, real community, and the kind of honest conversations that actually move the needle. Not just another thing you consume and forget by Friday. Listen, you're not broken. You're just in between versions. And I'd love for you to come see what we've built. Head on over to reforgedchallenge.com. Again, reforgedchallenge.com. Check it out. See if it speaks to you. And if it does, I'll see you inside. All right, let's get back to it.
Wow, man, that's heavy, man. Yeah.
It's a trauma dump. It's a big one.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You know, and I'm often reminded of the phrase, right? It's probably not going to come out right, but I think you know the spirit what I'm trying to say this in is, you know, when you think you're having a bad day, there's always somebody who's got it worse, right? And I was probably sitting on a porch somewhere, soaking in my tears when you're going through this. Maybe I probably stubbed my toe on a couch, or maybe somebody drank all the milk in the refrigerator, and I was hunger for or craving some Oreos, right? But man, that's a lot, dude, and that would make a lot of people just punch out, or you say I'm done, or just resort to very toxic things, behaviors, substances, or worse off, end up taking their own life. I don't think I asked this, but give us some insight on your time at the CIA, if whatever you can disclose, because I know there's some OPSEC there or operational security there. But how much time did you spend at CIA? What did you do? What was your role in the CIA, to kind of give us some context of, what was your life like in the CIA?
It was a wild ride. Yeah. The phrase, I think there's a bunch of different proverbs based around that phrase that you were talking about. But the one, I think it's an Irish proverb that I'm thinking of is I cried because I didn't have any shoes. And then I met a man that didn't have feet. Kind of to your point of what you're talking about, Karl. And I still felt that way even when I was going through it, because of some of my service time with the government and what I saw when I was overseas. And you see, I mean, we live in a first world country. We know that inherently,
Yep.
but we don't always remember it. And I learned that from working in third world countries. And I know you served on the military side, and we're in a lot of different environments as well. And so, yeah, for me, that was basically my first job out of college. I was hired out of Indiana University to work primarily on the finance and analytical side of the CIA. They were building up ever since basically Bush increased the workforce there post 9/11. They basically were building up the cadre. I think they quadrupled in size, something like that, from the time that he took over and basically wanted to reinforce the national security there. So I was hired in. I started in 2007. I was in kind of the more international side of things. That's where the business is oriented anyways. But I worked primarily with Asia at the beginning, and had a bunch of different specializations that led me to being sent pretty much all around the world. They realized pretty quickly that they could send me anywhere, and I would kind of adjust to the circumstances a little bit. So I traveled all over. I was in California multiple times, Hawaii. I know I'm starting out with the nice ones, but then I went to Cambodia and Thailand and China, Hong Kong. The list is very long.
Wonderful vacation spots.
Yeah, exactly. There were some good ones in there. I mean, you did have a Hawaii for a week, but the ones that I was the ones that maybe weren't as nice of vacation spots were the ones that I was there longer. So I spent 2 years in Cambodia, and you probably can relate to this, Karl. I was always drawn to the spots that nobody else wanted to go to. I was because that's where the action is. That's where you want to go and you want to experience. I traveled for basically 3 years out of the 6 that I worked there, and it was, I applied for all the war zones that I could. I applied for a bunch of different areas. I didn't always get into those, but they ended up making that job for me in Cambodia. It was the kind of first of its kind job, a very hybrid job where I was dealing with the local government there. I was doing a lot of different things, but I was the first of its kind. And that's kind of where I learned a lot of the stuff that carried forward, and I think helped me through, because I kind of went through my largest downswing in between the period that we're talking about right now in Cambodia and the period we just talked about. The low actually kind of happened in a lot of ways before that, but in between the two periods. But Cambodia is where you learned, where I learned the whole kind of somebody not having their feet kind of thing, because I hear from the locals that we worked with, like they'd tell stories about, well, I didn't have any shoes, and so I was walking around in the street and I pulled the sandals off of somebody there that he was talking about. There were so many dead bodies in the street that he could get a free pair of shoes, and he was so happy. And I'm thinking, well, I'm never gonna whine about having to pay for a pair of shoes again. At least I can get them. At least they're accessible for me.
Yeah, no, that really paints a very good perspective and just how good we have it in our lives, right? We really do. I can relate, man. I've been in some parts of this world, man. I come back to the U.S. and I'm literally kissing the soil, maybe not literally, but you understand what I'm saying. And it really paints a perspective of the things we should be grateful for, whether the internet's down or, the bread's out of stock or toilet paper's out of stock or whatever. We really do have it good here. I'm the belief that we just forget that, because we're so caught up in our daily affairs. So you talked about this chaotic period, this period of doom. And you also mentioned there was a period before that too. So feel free to elaborate on this. But as you do, right? I mean, and I could speak to this, but CIA, I think, operates at a different level. Actually, I know they operate at a different level than where I was at. Because in the CIA, man, you're trained to operate in chaos, right? Multiple continents, high stakes environments. So you were built to handle pressure, and I heard clues to that as you're talking through this, especially in ways that you handled them, right? But yet you look back at that week, and you mentioned that this week had took you out, right? So what does it mean to a man who is trained to control everything, control the chaos, to control your mind, control your environment, yet when he has zero control, how does that happen, or what runs through your mind in that event?
It's a great question because I'm somebody that, especially as a result, it's probably causation and correlation with that career. I'm used to being a planner. I'm that way in my everyday life. I batch activities together. I do a lot of different things that my plan is usually very efficient. And part of it is being there and learning things, but also I had a predisposition for that too. So I kind of, that's what helped me get into it in the first place. But it's a great question because it basically shows you can have the best laid plans, and life will show you, here's what I think of your best laid plans. And it threw me in another direction. But that summary that you talked about at the beginning of the call, that makes me sound a lot better than I actually am. A lot of that stuff happened, obviously minus the intelligence career, but a lot of that stuff happened since then. I wrote my book and became a published author since then. I got the radio show since then. I bought into the 3PL and built that up since then. So there were a lot of things that it basically, I don't know if I needed a refresher on this, but I guess life kind of thought that I did, but it increased my level of drive. And I think my drive has always been pretty high, but it made me more focused than I ever was, because it was like, okay, you have to be able to put yourself in a situation where you have those margins in your life, where right then I didn't have a lot of margins. And then ironically, not to get too much into the whole breast cancer side of things, but a lot of the breast cancer, when they're dealing with that, because I had 3 family members that were dealing with it, it's all about the margins within your body and how that cancer's metastasizing and how deep it's gotten inside you. And it's kind of the same thing in life, as far as the more you can build out margins, you don't know when you're going to need them. You're going to need those margins in your life. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since. So basically it's made it so that I'm now, like I said, 5 years past that, but I have people in my life that'll be like, well, why don't you ever just take a rest, or don't you ever just want to sit on the couch and watch The Price is Right and eat bonbons? Not really.
It does sound tempting.
Yeah. For a second, you kind of think about it, but not really, because I want to drive things forward. I want to drive my life forward. I want to help other people. And I don't want to ever be back in that state. I don't want to be back to where my margins are that thin, where I can be, yes, it's a whole storm, and I am trained to kind of, I'm the type, and you would be too, because the military is the same way. When there's a storm, there's 2 types of people. There's fight or flight. We talk about that mechanism all the time, but you're trained not only because there's flight, but we actually are flight as well, but we run to the storm, not away. It's not we stay static. We go towards the storm. And so when you weather that many storms, you realize then what you're capable of. And I think that's kind of what I took out of that period, where I said, okay, well, hey, what I got going right now is a lot easier to deal with. So let me make sure to build up that margin and build up that buffer zone, so that if I do get in a situation like that again, I'm better protected.
I love that phrase, build out your margins. That really helps put things in perspective, build out your margins, especially as entrepreneurs, we're always talking about margins, right? Build, margins, in your profit and so forth. But I love that phrase, man, build out your margins. That's probably one of the biggest things that I caught from this. And what you told me reminds me of something that David Goggins had said in one of his interviews. He mentioned something to the effect of, because people always ask, well, why do to the question or to the answer you gave, um, you know, why don't you take it easy? Why don't you relax? Kick your feet up, man. You've got a lot of wins. You could coast for a little bit. And David was quoted to say, well, he said this. He's like, man, if I do that, I'm afraid that one day I turn the switch off, I go back to being the old Goggins. I can't risk that. I already know what that old dude was like. I already know what that old life is back, and I never want to experience that again. Right. And so that's why that, he shows up in the capacity that he does. Is that too much? Well, that's your personal opinion. I mean, we all are entitled to it, but we do have to keep chasing it down to your point, build out our margins, right? Because you never know when life's going to kick you square in the nuts, and you're going to have a set of circumstances that you're going to have to deal with. But
exactly, there's. I think it's kind of a myth that there's a static state to life. You're never really in a neutral place. It's the same with business. You're either growing or you're declining, and you may not recognize that you're declining until you kind of get to a certain point. But if you're constantly in that growth arc, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you're going to get that step back. There's no way to avoid it. But as long as you're continuing forward, then you are building that margin. You're building that buffer.
Agree. 100%, man. To kind of put this in a better perspective, or more dire perspective, is if you're not growing, you're dying, right? At least that's what I'm reminded of when, by my coach. There is no stock. There is no coasting. You always have to focus on keep moving forward, keep growth focused, and whether it's your health, finances, business, so forth. Let's go back to that week and a little bit beyond that, because we talked about the chaos and so forth. As you navigated that week, you may have answered this, but I like to put some specificity on this. Did you feel that your training helped you during that week, or did it make it worse? Because you knew exactly what was happening and you couldn't stop it. So do you feel like it made it worse? Did it help you? What was your feedback on that?
I think it did help me, because with that type of training, you're used to being in the storm. So when the storm comes, you feel familiar. A lot of life is experiencing things and being familiar with them. If you don't have empathy, which I try to be an empathetic person, but empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's looking at the guy that may not have any feet when you don't have shoes, and it's thinking of him versus the situation that you're in. But life is still about experiences. And if you have the training and you have the experience of, oh wait, that storm cloud, it's coming overhead, and then you feel comfortable in the storm. There's a calm that washes over you in the storm, because that storm cloud has been over your head several times and you've gotten out of it, you've planned for it, all that. Now I couldn't plan for this scenario, but at least I know, okay, I've gotten through the other storms that have happened in my life. I survived my career. I survived the things that came after. So now I'm able to push forward, and it's just about that drive. It's about pushing forward, because again, that storm comes and it's going to make you, to your point, Karl, it's going to make you closer to dying. It's going to make you closer to going down that path if you don't fight against it. And weather. And those first few steps, you're going to be going against the wind, but you gotta get out. At first you're in that eye of the hurricane, then you got to go into the hurricane to get through it, because there's no going around it. You're right in the middle. There's no going around.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartly. And this is what shapes us to who we are today. The storms and one thing I want to highlight here is the norm of the storms, right? Our brains, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, especially in the level of training you've had, and maybe some of the things you've dealt with. Our brains are programmed to keep us safe, right? Our, so anything outside that is a threat, sweaty palms, racing heartbeat, all these different things, right? So what do you tell that person, that is navigating a storm, that forgot, all of this stuff back here, but they have sweaty palms, their heart's racing, they're like, oh, right? What do you tell that person?
It's a good question, and I guess it goes back to kind of your other question to more completely answer it. As far as did the training help? You didn't have any control. I did have control over one thing, and it was how I reacted to everything.
Ooh.
And
Yes.
so that's what I did have control over, and that's what you always have control over as a human being, how you react to something. No, you can't control any of that. And as somebody that likes being in control and is used to being in control, it happens to me all the time. But I can still control how I react to it, because that reaction is very important to me moving forward too. Like when I look back on that period, that week period or whatever, the lows in my life, it's important for me to be able to look back and say, okay, I'm at least pleased with how I handled the situation. I didn't lose it. I didn't take it out on anybody else. I didn't turn on my ex-wife and make it and go down into the mud.
Yeah.
I moved forward. You spend all that time, even in divorce, you spend all that time trying to take care of that other person, and then it's like when you get divorced, you switch to, well, no, now I have to make your life worse. No, you don't have to do that. You need to move forward in your journey, and hopefully, if you can be, not necessarily the bigger person, but a big person, and say, no, I still want your journey to be successful too, but I've got to go on my own now. And then you get through that. But yeah, I do think that getting through that storm and controlling what your reaction is really the key there.
Man, I hope everybody just stopped and took notes for a second, because that was a big thing I wrote down, was focus on the controllables, right? Because you can't control everything in life, but you can control on how you react to it. Your thoughts, actions, beliefs, and those are very valid things. You could have very well had responded very adversely to the divorce, or your mother getting bad news about cancer and losing your job and all these different things. You could have very well have just spiraled into a very toxic place. And with that, let's dig a little deeper here, because there's probably people thinking, my gosh, is there more? Yes, there is more, right? Because you said the cost was all of it, right? Total rebuild. But I want to be specific, especially those that are watching or listening, because all of it can sound really like a phrase, right? It's very vague. Financially, relationally, mentally. What did it actually cost you to lose those 5 things in that 1 week?
It's a good question. I think to answer it properly, I almost have to go back a little bit, because in the story arc here, you have the career in intelligence, and where I was basically at the top of a lot of different things, and I did not feel as though I was at the top of anything. My mental health was about as bad as it ever was during that time. And on the outside, it looked as though I was on top of the world. Hey, he's this international intelligence agent, and he's traveling around. Exactly. And I'm traveling around, and everything on the outside looked good. The inside was not good at all. I was having a lot of mental health issues. I was having suicidal ideation, and the pressure was getting to me, but I was strong enough to power through and still have the overall mission of, I have to support my brothers and sisters. I have to defend the American people. I have to do all of this stuff. But inside, I was getting more and more hollow. And then I got out, and got married shortly after that. And then had some health issues in there. I almost lost my arm due to a botched surgery after that. Yeah, I know. This is another path we can go down. I'm giving you. It's like the choose your own adventure books that we had when we're young. But you can pick whatever path you want, Karl. But
there's a part 2 coming, guys. I sense it.
But that happened, and then the reason I'm describing all that is because I had been through all that and kind of gotten to the recovery side. Then that big storm hit with the 5 things. Wow. And I realized at that time that that it was faulty reasoning before, when I was down on myself and when I was wanting to get rid of myself and thinking that I wasn't worth being here and it wasn't worth living and I wasn't worth anything. It took almost those 5 things to realize that I was wrong. So the cost was a reconciliation of my mental fortitude, where I said, you really were wrong about how you viewed things before, and so now it took this plummet to the bottom, and then you're able to rebuild from there. You understand that you need people and all of that. But I mean, there were a lot of things that it cost me as far as my health, but it was almost a reconciliation, a rubber band effect of what had happened in the past, where that I had already been down lower than that, and this was okay. No, you might be having life circumstances that are leading you one way, but you've actually been lower than this mentally, and you can get through this. So it's a strange story arc in that way.
Yeah. No, that really helps give some context. I appreciate you sharing that, man. I love to hear your take on this, or actually, I would love to hear your take on this. Is I've come to the belief that we have to have those seasons, right, for a reason, and at the time the dots won't connect behind us, right? But it's after the fact when those dots do connect, because it's those times that we reminds us that we can persevere. This season too shall pass, but it also gives us the strength and lessons learned. And I mean, I just love to hear your take on this, because somebody is going through this right now. Somebody is going through another Ryan-like, situation right now. It's like, what can I learn from this? What can I possibly learn from going through this storm right now? They're probably blaming God. They're probably blaming their spouse. They're probably blaming anybody they could find other than themselves, right? So, coach that person for a couple moments of, how do you help them find strength in that moment of time where they're like you, man? They're just like, they've got some thoughts that's not healthy. They're thinking that nobody loves them. There's no place for them in this world, which, by the way, that is not true. But what do you see this coach that person, man?
I agree with you, Karl. I mean, we've both been through those phases, and it's just objectively not true. And I had to learn that, even though I did have a negative view of myself. There's always somebody out there, and it's more than just somebody. It's many people that need you around and depend on you. And so to me, the way that I learned that and how I helped get through that season is really, I mean, I talk about the thing with my mom and staying back for her. That's, by the way, a great example of the whole, okay, I at the time I couldn't feel too bad for myself because she's dealing with breast cancer. That's the man with no feet right there. I'm the man with no shoes.
That's a good point.
She's the woman with no feet. And so that's really what helped me, was finding a purpose in helping other people. Because when people come to me, a lot of people come to me about mental health issues because I've dealt with what I have, and they want advice. And one of the main pieces of advice that I give them, because most people don't give this, okay, well, you got it. Yeah, your life is worth it. And that's all true. I'm not saying that that's not true, but you're going to get those kind of canned pieces of advice.
Yep,
But
agree.
the main thing that I tell people is do something positive for somebody else. It's that compound effect that we talked about earlier with the butterfly effect. If you just help yourself, you're not getting that much farther. If you help somebody else, you're helping them and you're feeling better about helping them. So you've helped yourself. You may not realize it, but it's in more of a sustainable way. It's instead of buying yourself that thing that will make you feel better, that shopping therapy that you want to do, and you buy that thing. Why don't you do something for somebody else? Buy something for somebody else. Go serve, soup at a soup kitchen. Go to an animal shelter and help dogs. Whatever the cause is, could be somebody in your immediate family. I've usually done that with my family side of things because I have a big family and I've had enough people to help. But there's causes out there, and that's the compound effect. You feel better by helping somebody else. So you can't do it for that reason. You can't say, well, I want to feel better, so I do this. No, you want to do it to elevate them. Otherwise, you truly don't get the effect. But if you think of somebody else and you think of that person when you don't have any shoes, that doesn't have any feet at that same time, you can lift yourselves both out of the depths that you're in.
Wow. Man, I feel like I just got a master class. That's so true, man. I agree. I can't think of any moment where, when I was in the thick of it, when I stopped for a moment and helped somebody else, or just called somebody or sent a text, hey, I just want to encourage you for a moment, and so forth, where I felt better, because it took the focus off of my pain, because our brain's only capable of, focusing on one type of pain, or focus on one thing, right? You can't focus on pain and comfort at the same time, or adversity and abundance at the same time, right? On that note, I want everybody right now, because if you're listening, you're not watching the video here. I want you to just imagine this James Bond guy, right? I'm Bond, James Bond, and living this life that he just talked about, going from continent to continent, living the life and so forth as he painted. And on the surface, he said, "Yeah, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm fine." Right? And a lot of guys with similar operational backgrounds, they don't talk about it, right? And that's an excellent point to raise up. What was happening inside your head during and after, either before that week, during that week, after that week, that you didn't show anyone?
That probably still, even though I was better. And by the way, for the listeners that aren't watching, please picture the James Bond rather than my mug. Please picture Daniel Craig or Pierce Brosnan. I just want to further that point that Karl made. But you're going to be gravely disappointed if you actually are viewing it and that this is what they end up looking like. But it's Hollywood, I guess. But no, there was a lot, because it was always a balance of, after that happened, I had to balance, okay, I've got to be here for my mom, my stepmom, my stepsister, all my family that's here. And I can't sit around and languish so there were things I tried at the beginning. I tried to reach out to some people, knowing that was probably what I needed to do. But because I have the relationship that I do with a lot of people in my life, where I'm usually the person that people come to, I'm usually the one making them feel better. Once it got reversed, it was kind of like, well, but you're Ryan, you've got it. You've got it covered. And that's, I had to kind of get into that mindset myself, because they had that belief in me, because they had seen that over time, but I didn't necessarily have that same belief in myself. And then once I instilled that in myself, like, yeah, I can get through. There's no other option. There's only, again, there's growing or there's dying. And so I can't be dying. I've got to be my best for these people around me. And so a lot of that was kind of learning to reconcile, like, okay, yeah, you can get through this. Like, I remember thinking after the divorce and after everything happened, I one of my friends asked me, he's like, well, you actually seem really good. You seem like you're okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure what to think about that. I don't know if I'm actively suppressing or repressing a bunch of things, but it's knowing where you are and meeting yourself where you are too, because that's important when you are dealing with other people, but it's important with yourself. You want to meet. I tell this to people all the time when they want to help somebody, because it's like in that stage of life, I needed to help my mom. I couldn't tell her to wait 6 months so that I could get over my divorce. That's not an option. You need to help people when they need help, not when it's convenient to you. And it's the same with yourself. You need to give yourself that attention and that grace when you need it, because sometimes you can double down, and that's where these mental health issues start. You can double down on yourself and add in on yourself when the world is being hard on you and say, oh yeah, you know what? You're not worth it. You're not worth it. No, you need to lean against that. You need to break the cycle. That's kind of one of the things that I had to learn is like, okay, I've settled the pieces that I could. I kept moving forward with my own life. I often view life as like an episodic, television show. This is going to be weird for a second, Karl, but go with me.
The Truman Show. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got these shows like, say, like a Law and Order or something like that, where they have a season-long story arc where there's a big story going on, and they're trying to solve the big case. But every week they have another case, they have another crime that they solve. Life is like that for us to a degree. You want to continue to move that story arc forward, and you want to continue to focus on that, but you do that by each week solving that one thing, solving that one case for yourself, helping that one person. And I look at life that way now. That my favorite show, it's obscure. My favorite show like this is Burn Notice. If anybody knows that show, they'll know why I like it, because I've been compared to that main character, because he's in intelligence, then he gets out, and then he doesn't know what to do, and he kind of rebuilds. But it's the same kind of thing. He has a story arc for the season and for the series as a whole, but he moves something forward every week, every day.
Real quick, before we keep going, if you've been listening to this conversation and something hit a nerve, if something we talked about made you pause, or you felt that little tug in your chest like, man, that one was for me, I want you to lean into that for a second. Don't just brush it off. Because here's the thing. Conversations like this, yes, they're great. And I love doing this show. I really do. But if I'm being real with you, a conversation can only take you so far. At some point, you got to stop nodding along and actually do something with that feeling. So here's what I want you to do. I want to personally invite you to something we built called the Reforged Challenge. It's a live 5-day experience I created specifically for people like you, high performers who know they're capable of more, but something got knocked sideways and the old playbook just stopped working. Or maybe life smacked you in the face with a 2x4 that you just didn't see coming. Maybe the fire just dimmed and you can't figure out how to reignite it. 5 days, 5 real identity shifts, live coaching, real community, and the kind of honest conversations that actually move the needle. Not just another thing you consume and forget by Friday. Listen, you're not broken. You're just in between versions. And I'd love for you to come see what we've built. Head on over to reforgedchallenge.com. Again, reforgedchallenge.com. Check it out. See if it speaks to you. And if it does, I'll see you inside. All right, let's get back to it.
Man, Burn Notice. That's a good series. I used to watch a lot of it. I haven't watched it in a while, actually. You mentioned this. You touched on this, but let's put this into the spotlight, because I think this is really important for folks to hear and know, and especially from you that's wearing the merit badges and wearing the scars to show this, right? Because you said that you learned the hard way that not everybody belongs on this journey with you. And man, I cannot agree with that more, but I want you to elaborate on this. That's not just a quote. That's something you've learned. That's something you've earned. is there anything specific where that lesson came from?
Yeah, there's probably a few. It's kind of it kind of derives from that period that I went through with my mom and watching
Mhm.
what she was going through, what I was going through, and then the outside people and how they were handling that. Because you're trying to rebuild yourself, you're trying to help other people, but if then you have people that tend to make your journey or what you're going through then immediately about themselves and say,
Yeah.
okay, well, yeah, but you're going through all this, but oh, listen to what I have. That's not necessarily what you want to attach yourself to, because although you want to give people a hand up, and I'm a big
Agree.
believer in that. I've talked about it all through this interview, but it's also, you have to choose the right people, because there will be people that will take advantage of that hand up.
100%.
And so you have to identify that, and it doesn't mean you summarily dismiss them, but it means you learn that and recognize that they're not owed that. They're not owed that. They may think they're owed that, but they're not owed that. They're not owed your time. They're not owed your effort. They're not owed your bandwidth and your mental health and your sanctity. They're not owed any of that. And I think that we lose track of that, especially if you are an empathetic person and you are somebody that wants to help somebody. It's an old phrase, but it still remains true. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's very true. Like, you can, if you've led the horse to water and then it runs back away or doesn't want to do that, you can't do everything for somebody. So you've got to understand that, okay, that maybe, and there's also a dual effect to this too, because it's not just about, oh, well, like the let them theory. Okay, let them do this and then cut them off. But there might be something too, if they get cut off by you, that may be the wake up call that they need too.
Agree.
Because you tried everything you could with them. So then if you say, nope, I wish you well. It's been real, it's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun, and we're done.
Yeah.
So that still could have a positive effect on them. If you tried everything else, then that's maybe the move that you need, and it could help them in the end as it helps you.
Yeah, man, I love that, man. So let's start. Now that we've really shared some behind the scenes and shared some of this darkness, man, let's talk about this rebuild and some of the things that you've been building and doing and what you did to actually do that, right? Let's talk about some tactics that, folks that are watching or listening right now, like, man, Ryan, all right, cool. I'm with you, but let's show them some tactics, some Ryan tactics. Because at some point that week had to end, right? And when I say that week, I'm using it as an umbrella term or umbrella phase, because the dust had to settle, and you had to figure out what's next with nothing, right? No car, no house, no marriage, no job. So, what was the first real decision? Not the first thing that happened, but what was the first decision that you had to make or made to start this new direction that you're moving into or that you're into now?
That's a good question. I think it's actually probably outside of the lane that I'm currently in, but it kind of led to a lot of the stuff. So when my mom was going through her surgeries, she had the 4 surgeries, and I would take her to Tennessee in between the surgeries. That's kind of the Smoky Mountains. That would be like a reprieve for her. And nice. I was trying to rebuild the direction of the business. I had my primary business at that point. I had a real estate business, but I kind of toned that down and put it in the hands of my business partner. And then I was focusing on an online sales business that was more on the eBay side of things. Yeah. So I actually moved into the Amazon side. That was one side of things that led to kind of all of this stuff. But then I also was going into kind of the sports content lane. And so I decided I was going to do a course. And while we were in Tennessee, I wrote a reference book on sports memorabilia. And that was I was down with my mom, just hanging out in this cabin. And I basically wrote that book in a very short amount of time, but that led to a lot of other things. That book led to me getting both of my radio shows. It led to doing a lot of stuff on the eBay side and becoming kind of a subject matter expert in sports memorabilia, selling 7 digits worth of sports memorabilia and meeting all these athletes. And so it led to a lot of things. It also taught me the business side of things that helped me on the Amazon side too. But as kind of, when you say a piece of advice, the main thing that helped me do a lot of this is I used to have a phrase. I was just talking about this last night. I used to have a phrase when I was in the government, and I was usually the last one there. I'm not saying that to brag, because I don't think that really helped me at all times. But I would have, my bosses would come in and they'd go, well, Ryan, you gotta take off, man. And the work will be here tomorrow. That'll be here tomorrow. I said, not if I do it today. It won't be here tomorrow, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We don't know what's going to come down tomorrow. So that's been one of my main tenets, is trying to work on what I can today and get everything done today. If I can push and I still got some gas left in the tank, I don't care if it's 11 o'clock, midnight. If I can get that one more thing done, that's one less thing that I have to do tomorrow, because we don't know what tomorrow holds.
Agree, man. Agree. Thanks for sharing, because that actually ties into something that I was going to bring up next, because you mentioned this batching process, right? Because you said batching is a system that you use to credit your success to, right? But I want to understand this, right? And I'm sure those that are listening or watching are like, what is he talking about batching? Like, huh? So walk me through what batching actually looks like in your week, step by step. Like, how does that work?
I like how you batched the words together, Karl. That was very clever. You went batch and actually. So very, very clever of you. But no, so basically I do have some work flexibility. I work from home some of the days, and I work in the warehouse some of the days. But I learned this along the way, and it's kind of a simple concept, but I think it's one that we ignore with all the distractions that we have. We say, okay, so you're a very busy guy. I'm busy as well. We're calendar driven. We got our calendars. We're subject to the calendars. But what'll happen is you'll see that open day. I had this yesterday for the first time. I don't know how long. I had not a single thing on my calendar yesterday. I got a lot of work done, but it's because of the batching concept. I have different family members or different people that'll say, well, what day do you have open this week? I don't base my schedule off of that. I say, hey, if I'm already headed into the office on Tuesday, then I'm going to plan everything that's out and on that side of town and requires me to be out and engaged and be people-y that day. I plan all of that at that time, because you had to go through certain things to get out of your house that day. You had to get all your stuff together, get your keys, get your phone, get your walk, get dressed, take a shower, hopefully. And I'm not, giving anybody any lessons on cleanliness, but you had to do your certain things to get out of the house. And if you can do that less of the time, I know this isn't always possible for people that say I have kids and have a set schedule every day, but you still can do it where if you are going out and already taking the kids to school, then okay, run all those errands that you're already out. Go get those errands done, because maximize if you have a big block of time at home. And it's the same when you're actually doing the tasks. Try to remain within that. I think this became popular with email batching. Like, okay, I'm gonna pay attention to my emails. I'm gonna do this for an hour, and then I'm gonna switch to something else. And there is something to that, because every time you switch from one task to another, not only do you have to switch your brain and make it work a different way, but you also have to go through whatever that transition is time wise to start that new system. So it's the same thing that's why with the actual tasks, it takes the most time. If you're already out and you know you've got to be out, then just get rid of all those tasks while you're out, and don't say, hey, well, I have till Thursday to do this, so I'm not going to worry about it on Monday. No, if you knock it out, then you don't have to worry about it on Thursday.
You just called me out, dude.
Procrastination is so big, and I get it.
Bro.
I really do get it. I'm not casting dispersions on anybody. I'm really not. But there was a time in my life, like we're talking about, that I didn't really have that luxury. I didn't really have the luxury to say, I can do this Thursday. No, I couldn't do I had to do everything yesterday. I didn't have time to wait till Thursday. I had to get everything done as soon as possible. So I still live that same way, with hopefully a little bit more balance.
Yeah. Thanks for, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my next question as I'm listening to you. I could probably answer this, but I want to hear you answer this. Because of your background in CA, and specifically in that background, you had to be a plan. You had to have plans, right? Even when things go sideways, you had to have a plan B, C. Things, you had to have those kinds of plans, right? So does that batching mindset, the strategy you just disclosed there, is that coming from that operational background, or is that something you learned through or the hard way in business as you're in this new season?
I think it's a little bit of both, because it probably started because one of the things, that's why I kind of look at it as a little bit more of a luxury now, where I do have workplace flexibility. I can work from home some days and then go in other days. When I was working for the government, because it's all classified material, I can't bring work home. I didn't even work on my home computer. Those are all separate. All the phones, all the computers, those are all separate. So then you can't necessarily do anything where you go, okay, I can bring this home. So I had to batch everything together. And from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I had to be in that building, because especially you're in the Washington, D.C. area, it takes you an hour to get in if you've got a decent commute.
I've been there. Yep.
And so batching is even more relevant when you're in that big city environment. If you've got to drive 2 hours to go in, or an hour to go in, 2 hours round trip, then you need to batch everything you can. You need to work that extra hour so that you don't have to worry about, I've got to go in now a full other day because I didn't, if I would have just worked an extra hour or two, I wouldn't have had to do that.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. That's great stuff. Right now with you running the 3PL, you've got your radio gig with 2 shows, and then the content side. And I think there's a list of other things that you do as well. So there's multiple lanes here, right? In party intake, you described, or maybe you mentioned it here too, that leadership is probably one of the heaviest things that challenges you the most. And I think a lot of people, especially high achievers, can resonate with, right? So what does that weight actually feel like when it's heavy? And what do you do with it?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I feel it the most probably in the 3PL Encore Business Group. We're located here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And you have every decision that I make there impacts not only our customer base, but our employees and everybody. That's a whole network that everybody depends on that central item. And so yes, you want to be a leader of people, but in that case, it's you have to be the leader of that entity as well, and make sure that entity is optimized, because if it's not, then these people that depend on it, they depend on it for their pay and to live and to pay their bills and to get their, you owned and ran multiple 3PLs, Karl, that your partnering with a lot of other people that their businesses depend on that. If you stop doing their work, then their stuff isn't going into Amazon or whatever platform it's on. So it's all of that. So I feel that that's part of the reason that keeps me motivated to continue to work and do that extra hour, because it's not just about, oh, hey, if it was a singular focus, you probably have this too, being former military. When I was in the government, my cause was so much greater than myself. It was okay, I'm defending the American people. I have this greater good that I'm going for. So when I got out, it was very hard for me to work for, say, just a corporation, because no fault to anybody that does. It just, I didn't have that greater good, that greater cause, if I was just trying to affect the bottom line. Now I have that, because you own a company, you're the leader. You have to make sure that you keep that on the right track. If you don't, then the whole network that you've created, that the symbiotic relationship that everybody has with this organism that you've created, if you don't continuously feed the organism, then that whole network is going to fall apart, because you let that one thing crumble. And you might just, if you start thinking about it as, oh, well, I got to collect my paycheck. Well, that's a little too small minded for that kind of operation.
Man, that's a great point. Something I pulled away from that, man, was just focus on something that's bigger than you, right? Because life's not about you, and sometimes, well, I would say sometimes, quite a few times, I have to remind myself of that, right? I appreciate you sharing that. So as we wrap up, man, because I know we could talk for a lot longer, man. So I do sense a part 2, part maybe 3, 4, who knows, man. And guys, if you're listening and you're loving what you're hearing here and you want more, please let us know, because, like Ryan alluded to, or actually didn't allude to, said very specifically, I'm focused on something bigger than us, right? To impact as many people as I can with this podcast, with this show, to show people that you're not the only one that's going through the trenches, and this too shall pass, right? So I pray and hope that this is not only this episode, but other episodes are bringing that to life. So as we wrap up here, my dude, I've got a couple rapid fire questions, some of which I already kind of prepared you for in full transparency out there. Because grit can mean different for every person, and especially in each different season. In the season that you're in the stage of life you're in, what does grit mean to you right now?
It means continuing forward in all of the seasons, because it's not just in the face of adversity. It's not just the fact that you are getting through the storms that we're talking about. It's having that mindset all of the time. Even when the storm has passed, you're continuing to go forward and grind and get better every day, because just like we're saying, you're either kind of living or you're dying kind of mindset. You also need to make sure that you're improving yourself every day, that you're making yourself better, because as much as we're talking about like the good things that have happened, I don't necessarily view myself that way, and not in a mental health way or self-deprecating way. It's more, I look at the deficiencies and then continuously try to improve those, because the minute you start highlighting those good things, then you take a step back and you don't necessarily grind forward as hard.
No, I thank you for saying that, because I think everybody, myself included, needs to take heed to that, but in a healthy way, right? And as you were saying that, I could almost finish your sentence, talking about do it in a constructive way, because unfortunately, too many of us look at ourselves in a negative way, right? But you just said, look at yourself in a negative way, in a light to improve each day, even if it's just 1%, right? That's something I want to highlight there, because oftentimes too many people are trying to focus on intensity rather than just being consistently better every single day. with especially in this, with this growth period and everything you're doing, and I'm sure you can agree, man. There's always this talk of adding new things, new systems, new thoughts, new things you've got to learn, especially with AI. I am also, especially in this season, I'm of the belief that you also have to have subtraction, right? So, in order to grow. So, what was one thing you've had to subtract from your life, either something you believe, something you've had to unlearn, or unbelieve? Yeah, that was grammatically not correct. But what is something you've had to remove out of your life, or a point of friction you had to remove in order for you to grow or to level up?
Yeah, that there's probably a few. I think that part that we talked about earlier about learning when to kind of cut certain things out, that not everything is worth your time. I think that's a big factor to consider, and not from a self-aggrandizing standpoint. That's why I mentioned the part about wanting to continue to improve myself, because have to be careful because you can have people look at this podcast and say, oh, well, these are two guys are just talking this one guy up, and okay, he's accomplished all that, but I can't do that. If I was able to do it, you'd be able to do it. There's nothing inherently that special about me. It's that I kept grinding, but also, got rid of some of those margins that you said, okay, to create your own margins, you've got to cut some of the things that just aren't performing well. Same if you're in a business. Okay, you've got you have a background in Amazon, so do I. Some of those products at the low end of the catalog that aren't selling, you got to cut that. You got to do the same thing with your life. The low performer, you got to cut the fat.
Yep. Yeah, I love it, man. Cut the fat. And I feel kind of like you're talking to me, man. No, I'm kidding.
I'm trying to do it with myself too. I'm down. I'm down 20 since I last saw you, so I'm cutting it.
Good for you, man.
Too. Yeah, so
that's awesome, man. I'm very happy for you, man. Keep trucking along, man. Hopefully, I don't even know when we're going to see each other, man, because we don't even know when the next conference is. But
I think we're on the books for March. I think we're going to see each other in March here.
Oh, okay, cool. You're going to be in Orlando for that? Sweet. Yeah. Heck yeah, man. Looking forward to that. So I prepared you for this question, these last few questions in a green room. So encourage the audience for a moment, because when you're in the trenches, either for a moment or a season, when you're in the thick of it, man, what is a quote or directive you find yourself just coaching yourself with, or telling yourself to get through that moment or through that season? What's something that jumps out at you?
At the risk of going back to something that we already said, I think the central theme of the whole idea of that, I cried because I didn't have any shoes until I met someone that doesn't have any feet. The idea that it can always be worse, and you're often making it worse in your own head. You're often exaggerating, because I'm guilty of that. I did that when I was because from the outside I listen. It's kind of surreal when you're talking about, wow, that's so cool that you worked in the CIA and you did all this stuff and traveled internationally. When I left that building every day, I didn't feel good about myself. I didn't feel like I was doing anything good. I saw all the deficiencies, and so changing your perspective on that and viewing yourself accurately, because some people need this adjustment one way or another. I think we're speaking more towards people that maybe do have some mental health issues, or do kind of look at themselves in too low of a light. But we both know people that maybe are a little too high on themselves too. Yep. And that is the thing. And so, those people maybe need to bring themselves down a notch, but you just have to adjust it and view yourself accurately. That's what I've always tried to do. Is I've always said I don't want to be my own biggest fan. I'll leave that to somebody else, but I have to
I'll be your biggest fan, Ryan.
I appreciate it. See, same with you.
I am your biggest fan.
I'd rather be somebody else's biggest fan rather than myself.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think life will have a way to to remind people just how small they really are in the big picture of things. So, all right, my dude. Well, this last question is a two-part question, and as I prepared you in the green room, or I gave you some time to think, but this kind of educate the audience what this question is, a two-part question. If you've heard this show before, you've heard my episodes, you already know what to expect. But those of you who have not, I love to ask my guests or give them an opportunity to ask my next guest a question. Maybe it's a season of life they went through. Maybe it's a moment like, man, I wonder what somebody else would do in my shoes, right? And so far, every question has been perfect for the guests, and it's no exception for you, my dude. So with that being said, my previous guest that I was jammed with earlier had this question for you. What does success in this time of your life mean for you, and why?
That is a good question. Well, and for the listener too, Karl told me that I was going to have a question, but he didn't tell me what the question was. So I
We'll
just
get
want
there.
I want to make that part clear. But I mean, I think for me, it's that greater good that we're talking about. It's the fact that success is not a singular concept. It's the idea that if you're truly successful, then you are improving the station and lives of the people around you, of your network, and of the people that you impact every day. That's to me how I measure success, because okay, I'm adding these titles to my resume as far as, published author, radio host, all the things you listed at the beginning. That doesn't mean nearly as much to me as the value that I can provide to other people and their lives. That means a lot more. It may sound corny to people, but to me, that's how I measure success, because that's the internal. Those things are all external. They're all just resume builders. To build up the inside, those things don't help. They're hollow. The fact that I'm a radio host doesn't help me internally. I listen to my voice on the radio and I want to turn it off when I hear my commercial.
You too?
Stuff in the studio. I do. I hate it. But it's the idea that I hope that me working through that and putting my voice out there and putting myself out there helps somebody else. Same reason I did this podcast. And I would imagine the same reason that you do this podcast, because you have a lot of things that you could choose to do next. And you've chosen to do this to elevate other people.
Yeah, 100%, especially where I live. I could be sitting on the beach right now enjoying this beautiful sunny weather. But
that makes one of us. I'm up in Michigan, so that makes one of us, Karl.
Hey, man, it's the perks of being in Florida. But in a few weeks, you're going to hear me complain, my God, it's too hot here. So there is that. All right. So as you mentioned earlier, the last part of the question, what is one thing you will love to ask my next guest?
So I'm thinking now that I've seen the format to the show a little bit more, I think, you talk about kind of the snapshot of time, and then you like to go back to the inflection point of where you got, of how you got to this snapshot in time. So I think mine would be more about, once you get to the end, then it's more about legacy. It's what legacy do you think you would leave now, and how do you want to improve that legacy as you move forward, and how would you do that?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Did I hold it? Did I keep the chain moving?
You did, man.
Okay, good.
You kept the integrity of the chain, and I love it, because my next guest is perfect for him. And I can't tell you as much as, no, actually I don't.
Yeah, they'll have to tune in to find out, Karl. We don't want to tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, as much as I hate to wrap this up, man, obviously as most good things, they do have to temporarily end, because I do sense another part or more coming up. So again, those of you who are listening or watching, let us know, if you want a part 2 or part 3, because as the more we dive into Ryan's story and the things that he shared, man, there's just so much more to unpack and so much more value and wisdom to share with you all. But let's let's kind of table this for now. And that being said, Ryan, my dude, thank you for so much for coming on here and not just giving us this wonderful James Bond. I didn't do it in his voice, but this James Bond CIA debrief. But you allowed us to peek underneath, actually give us a really good look at that week in that period of life, man, where, it was deep. It was heavy. I felt it, right? And so I really respect you for showing that, because especially in this era that we live in where everything's so artificial, things is so fake, we need this humanization, if that's even a term. If not, oh well, I just made it up. You're welcome. But we need this in our life. We need realness. We need real stories. We need real tactics from the Ryans, the Karls, and other people in this world. So again, man, I really appreciate you and honor you for coming on here and sharing this.
I'm happy to come to be on and to come on again if that's what people want. I'm happy to share more of my story and go more in depth, because I'm all about that relational aspect now, serving other people and helping other people. So if it does it, I'd gladly talk with you on here and offline too, because I'm sure we'll do that as well.
Absolutely, that's coming. All right. So for the person that's listening right now, either they want to connect with you, or they want to hear your radio show, because I want to hear some radio show episodes with you now. But man, where can people find you, especially with your 3PL? What if they want to connect with you? What are some good places? One or two good places they could connect with you?
So that's kind of tough for me, because I don't have like a central location for a lot of this stuff. But Encore Business Group is our 3PL. EncoreBusinessGroup.com. You can reach out to me there. I'm Ryan at EncoreBusinessGroup.com. If you want more information on the shows, I'm happy to give you those. But Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh, and then Shane Graham's Extra Points, which will be recording in about 4 hours here. I have that tonight. So I'll be talking some more, but those are on Jethro FM here locally. But happy to connect with anybody. Feel free to email me there, and I'd be happy to give out my phone number via email if we need to connect on a phone call and all of that. I have that printed on my business card, my cell phone number, because I believe in connecting with people in this way here.
Man, I love your heart, dude. And we'll definitely be dropping all that in the show notes, in addition to all your social media contacts, handles. So those of you who are watching or listening, please dive into the show notes, grab the information. Encore Business Group, his sports shows, and guys, he's got such an amazing heart, and I can just feel his authenticity, wanting to help people show up and just help them, because he understands. He's been through it, right? He's seen people, that needed shoes and needed that. So, as we wrap up, guys, and I say this on every episode, and this is certainly no exception. To those that are listening or watching, we know that the gap, between excellence and average is just action, even imperfect action. So please don't just sit here and listen to Ryan and get hyped and motivated. Take just one thing that he shared with you today. It could be, the batching concept. It could be, focusing on something that's bigger than you, or anything else he shared. Just take one of these things and do it in the next 24 hours. Be the reason that somebody doesn't quit today. Don't just keep this episode to yourself. Share it with someone in your circle who needs this right now. Send it to them. Ryan, again, my dude, thank you so much for stepping into the arena today, man.
Happy to do it. I'll come back anytime.
Awesome, man. Awesome.